Iowa Media Day officially in the books. It was an eventful day, as it always is here in early to mid-August. And of course, we've got the Kids Day Open scrimmage tomorrow. That's Saturday, August 10th. If you are interested in attending, it's free and open to the public inside Kinnick Stadium. So we'll learn a little more about this team, watching some drills and some 11-on-11 action tomorrow. But some instant takeaways from today's media availability coming in just a moment. But first, I want to thank our two sponsors, Under the Kitchen. Randy down at Under the Kitchen in Mitchellville. Be sure you go to his stand at Fry Fest. Support local and support a Hawkeye fan, a guy who's supported this show, supporting Hawkeye athletes with these NIL deals and these original Hawkeye prints. Again, that's Under the Kitchen at Fry Fest. Also, want to thank Iowa Floor Covering. Yes, they're down in Bondurant, but regardless of where you live, give them a call and see how they can help you with your next flooring project, perhaps a DIY project. 515-379-7000. You can also check out their website, iowafloorcovering.com. So Iowa Media Day is officially in the books. We started out the day as typical with lunch, courtesy of Iowa. Always appreciate their kind hospitality, and a large group of the media, both print, websites, etc., talking with Kirk first. Kirk approached the podium at about 1:45 p.m., was asked a variety of topics, as he always is. But, of course, it's a new era without Brian Ferentz. The first media day without Brian Ferentz since, 2016, something like that. In fact, I guess I'd have to go back. I think it was before that, right? Because he was a position coach at Iowa before he took over as the offensive coordinator. That was not asked of Kirk. It was asked back at Big Ten Media Days. That was not something that we saw that we heard asked in front of the podium today. One thing that was asked was about the quarterback room, and that's no surprise to anybody. Cade McNamara coming off 2 serious knee injuries. Of course, he played briefly for Iowa last season before going down. What Kirk Ferentz said as it relates to the quarterback position is that they both have done a good job. Speaking of Cade McNamara and Brendan Sullivan, he also included Jacob Gill. When asked about the quarterback battle, he mentioned Jacob at the wide receiver position, coming in with Brendan Sullivan, and really performing well. He used that quote exactly. They have done a really nice job. And he made a point of saying this quarterback room is more competitive than it was last year. That is not a surprise to any of us, but it's good reassurance from Iowa's head man. I asked Kirk Ferentz about his comments at Big Ten Media Day regarding having a package in place potentially for a guy like Brendan Sullivan, and also asked, hey, is that a situation where maybe you have a package in for a skill set of Marco Lainez, for instance, with his ability to run the football? And Kirk said something that I thought was a little bit intriguing. He made the statement, well, first of all, yes, he indicated, yes, this is a possibility. But he also made the statement that he thinks that's just good football, utilizing your best players. And obviously they view Brendan Sullivan as one of their better players right now. Now, it's still early in camp. We'll see how these guys look tomorrow. But my anticipation right now, even though I told everybody, yesterday, day before, that Sullivan has been impressive and maybe the battle's a little closer than originally thought, my hunch is that they'll still go with Cade McNamara, but I think Brendan Sullivan will play regardless of how Cade McNamara holds up as it relates to his health. But Kirk kept saying it's good football when you play your best players. Didn't specifically note anything about Marco Lainez, but I did think that was noteworthy as a whole. He did not attribute that philosophy to Tim Lester. That was one thing I asked. Is that maybe the Tim Lester effect, the Tim Lester influence, that you're more willing to look at options for a second quarterback? We know Kirk has been hesitant in the past to play 2 quarterbacks. He did not attribute it to Tim Lester, but it does sound like something that they plan on utilizing. He made the statement that this whole team is as veteran as he can remember, really veteran up front. He brought up the punt return game. He feels good about Caden Weegan, the physicality of a young man who he called fearless, but a guy who still needs to develop his confidence. And he said there's a fine line between being fearless, especially with punt return duties, and actually being confident with what you're doing and where you're going. Caleb Johnson, even though he's not atop the running back room right now, according to the depth chart, he is set to return kicks again, at least per Kirk Ferentz. One guy we didn't get a chat with today, Phil Parker. Kirk told us that Phil recently got run into, and it sounds like Phil maybe had some shoulder issues in the past, And Phil Parker had surgery on one of those shoulders yesterday. He was already back at practice today, but Seth Wallace really pulling a heavier load with Phil Parker out. I guess that's the luxury when you have a guy who is now making $1 million a year in Seth Wallace. And as an assistant defensive coordinator and linebackers coach, you can pull him in and put a heavy load on him to fill in for Coach Parker. I don't see that really affecting things. Again, we didn't get to chat with Phil to know what type of a recovery he has in store. I am curious to see, will he be on the sidelines this year? Will he end up in the press box? Historically, he likes to be on the sidelines, but maybe the shoulder surgery and recovery has an impact there. He was asked, Kirk was, about defensive line depth. He mentioned Jeremiah Pittman. That was a consistent theme as we talked to the players later in the afternoon as well. The maturity and leadership of Jeremiah Pittman kept getting brought up. So watch for Jeremiah to have a role this year. He's definitely solidified himself in that top 6. And Kirk made a point of bringing up Max Llewellyn as really taking a step forward. So that's good. Guy in the interior, guy on the outside, maybe number 3 at their respective positions. Both guys have matured exceptionally well this offseason. He was also asked about offensive line play, deferred back to his time at Cleveland. Just talked about having experienced the impact of veteran leadership. Didn't use the phrase 7 guys, but he used that phrase back in Big Ten media days. And it sounds like he's pretty confident with the guys up front. As it relates to the run game specifically, he did make mention of some injuries they've suffered there in the running back room. One being LaShawn Williams, who's been out with a soft tissue injury. And Kirk said there have been 4 to 5 guys who have been dinged up, but nothing real serious right now. In fact, the one guy we knew about that had a recent surgery, Cohen Entringer, is already back in the practice field. They've had to kind of hold him back because he's acting like nothing happened. So they're being careful with Cohen, but he is not going to miss this season. He actually tweaked an ankle the other day, according to Kirk. Kirk was also asked about the new college football playoff, did acknowledge that your goals have to change a little bit with the new 12-team playoff. He referred to the college football playoff shows in the past with the 4-team format. He referred to those shows as stupid because he thought it took away from the impact and just the special nature of college football when teams are basically eliminated from that 4-team race early in the season. You may not necessarily agree with that, but that's Kirk's take and consistent with how he's expressed himself in the past. Also, some people won't like this, but I think here's a young guy who's earned it. Tyler Barnes, Kirk's son-in-law, who's been the lead recruiter, director of recruiting. He has now been named the football chief of staff and the football manager. So whatever that means, it's a promotion and more responsibility, but also gets different responsibility. Kirk talked about the changing landscape, college football, and certainly Tyler Barnes has been a big part of what Iowa's done with NIL, with the transfer portal. Tyler was out in the practice field briefly, and he was wearing a Swarm shirt. So take that as you will. I will be coming out with some exclusive interviews with players, right? So a lot of availability, really thankful to Iowa for making all these players available, but also some footage from a conversation I had with Coach Tim Lester. I asked Coach Lester about waist downs. I asked him about wide receiver play, what type of involvement he had when he was at Western Michigan, what makes a great receiver, who's standing out at that position. Very fascinating conversation. I also talked with Coach Betts about that loaded running back room and much, much more. Stay tuned, folks. I'll give you coverage following the game. We'll have a live show with Coach Don Patterson in the coming days in reaction to everything this weekend, including the open scrimmage, which starts at 11 a.m. Doors open to Kinnick. Gates open at 10 a.m. Saturday. Stay tuned. More on the way, folks. Hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll talk to you soon.